My name is Trevor Sample. I'm with the Illinois EPA Watershed Management Section. I'm just going to briefly go over our 319 grants that we administer. Now, we call these 319 grants because they are authorized under Section 319 of the Clean Water Act. This is federal money that's given to us by U.S. EPA to distribute throughout the state to help fund non-point source activities. Now, we fund two main types of projects: watershed implementation, planning, and implementation of those plans. So watershed-based planning, this is a stakeholder-driven process. We don't write the plans for you. The recipients are responsible for writing the plans, but we want to see good representation of stakeholders who live and work in the watershed to help put these plans together. So we want to see in agriculture-dominated watersheds that farmers and ag retailers have a seat at the table when these plans are developed. And these plans must meet 9 minimum elements. That's a requirement by U.S. EPA. We'll talk about those in a minute. And as you can see from this map here, we already have a lot of watershed-based plans approved throughout Illinois. I won't go through all of these. Just know that when you do watershed-based plans, there are 9 minimum elements that must be addressed in that plan in order for us to approve them. So once the plan is completed, it's sent to our agency, we will review it and approve it. We then have to send it to U.S. EPA, and they will approve it as well. Now, these plans do have a shelf life. They will expire in about 10 years. So in 10 years, we would like to see those plans updated. And we will also fund to help to have those plans updated after 10 years. There's also a resource that might be hard to see in the back, but there are some online resources that can help you get started and walk you through the watershed planning process. In terms of implementation, as long as it addresses non-point source runoff, we can fund it. So a lot of the practices that you're used to getting cost share funding through NRCS and other federal and state programs, we will also help cost share. Now, we do have priority watersheds. So every year when we get a batch of applications, we have this 5-year rotating basin priority watersheds. So certain watersheds are priority for planning. Some watersheds are priority for implementation every year. We also now have our priority watersheds for the nutrient loss reduction strategy for nitrogen and for phosphorus. We also see those in the red outline. Those are the watersheds that are priority for the Keeper for the Crop program to protect local water sources. So we have lots of priority watersheds that we can look at. Now, just because you're not in a priority watershed for a certain year doesn't mean that we discourage you from applying. You can still apply. It just means that those that are priority for that year are given first consideration. Just a little bit of specifics about the grant real quickly. There is no minimum or maximum, although for the maximum we're kind of restrained by how much money we have to spend that year. These are 60-40 grants, so we'll pay 60% of the funding. There must be 40% match, and the main rule for the match is it can't be federal funds. We can't match federal funds with federal funds, so it has to be local funding. It can't be federal. The project lengths are 2 years. The applications are due August 1st of every year, except for a year like this year where it falls on a weekend. So if you're submitting an application this year, it's due July 31st. Just a couple notes. If you implement practices with 319 money, doesn't necessitate public access to your property, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you're implementing a best management practice, we'd like to see there be operation and maintenance so that through the life of that practice, so it will be maintained. So who's eligible? Pretty much anybody. Watershed groups, so water conservation districts are popular. Municipalities, local governments, conservancy districts, non-for-profits, and associations. So about anybody's eligible to receive these funds. Now each year from US EPA, we get about $3.5 to $4 million to spend. Lauren talked about that $800 million a year price tag. We can contribute $3.5 to $4 million to that every year for non-point source implementation and for planning. Now, last few years, the rules have gotten a little stricter on what we can spend that money on. So 90% of our planning can be for implementation of an existing watershed-based plan, 10% to develop plans. So it means that if you're putting in an application to watershed planning, the competition for that's a little bit tighter because there's less money to spend on that. We like to see the match be secure at the time of the application. Match can be in-kind service, it can be cash, it can be partner contribution. If there's a state or other local grant in the watershed that's doing like services, that can be considered. This is a competitive grant, so every year when we get the grants, staff at our agency and in other agencies as well review them, we score them, we submit, and we select the ones that we like. We submit that work plan up to US EPA, and then they have to approve it. Those contracts are then executed the following spring or summer. That concludes my talk. I'll be around along with the manager of the watershed section in the back, Amy Walkenbach. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have about 319 grants. Thank you.